I've just started a really exciting new project in my walled garden. I've got 2 sets of pleached hornbeams which run down the outside because I planted them to hide the extension of the cottage, which looked right over this lovely walled garden. And so what I did is I actually joined my hornbeams over the top with arches, and it was quite shady along the little grass paths that ran up between the 2 lots of hornbeams. Now, there were disadvantages to this. A, not a lot would grow underneath them and the grass didn't grow that well. And also fiddly little paths to mow and to edge are a bit of a pain. So I've decided to remove the grass and put little hard paths running up the 2 lines of trees. Now, I could have just done straight lines. The whole garden is very rectilinear and quite symmetrical. But I decided to add a bit of movement. I would make a serpentine path. And this video is all about making serpentines, laying them out, setting them out, and why you use them. Now, serpentine, obviously the shape is from serpent, from a snake. And basically it's wiggles, lovely wiggles. And they're usually quite geometric wiggles, but the serpentine shape, like snake-like shape, can be like that, and all variation of curves, or it can be quite regular. It's a very traditional thing in a way, but I like serpentines because they add a lot of movement to a space, and they're very useful if you're trying to join a formal area to an informal area. So I want to make these little paths between the trees a little bit more informal with a bit more movement. And so what I did is, what I do on the plan is I draw out what sort of curve freehand that I think I want. And that's how many bulges I want along that length. And when I think I've got it right freehand, I then set it out properly using radius. Now, normally I do that with a compass and a ruler, and I measure it out so I have one curve and then another curve and another curve, and they back onto each other. But this time, because my daughter Unity, who works with me and is behind the phone filming me, is very good on SketchUp, she did what I thought was right freehand, but she did it symmetrically on SketchUp. And then she tried different options as well. So you could really see, and then she pulled it up into 3D, because when you stand up and look at a serpentine on the ground, it looks very different from when you see it on the plan. And so that was a really useful experiment to do. Now, apart from the paths here, I've used serpentines in many places. At Horatio's garden, I did a serpentine rill. So it was raised out of the ground and it was a regular serpentine. And I used the same shape of the rill in bands of stone sets within the gravel. I often do serpentine hedges. I think they're really nice, whether they're cloud pruned or whether they're just ordinary hedges. I like doing serpentine edges to lawn sometimes. I think when you have these sort of amorphous curves to lawn, it's not a sort of style I like very much, but if you have a regular serpentine, it can work in certain situations very well. The thing that people probably know most of is you get serpentine walls around walled gardens, and they're called crinkle crankle walls, and they're built like that partly because of the shape, and you get the nice bits of south and different orientations on that same wall, and also because structurally it's a much stronger shape. When you build it out of brick, you don't have to use so many bricks to get more structure in a serpentine curve than if you have a straightforward straight brick wall. Anyway, so I'm going to show you, first of all, what I did with these paths is I sprayed off the grass using glyphosate, and I let it die, and then I've dug it out, having set it out. Now, I do all the donkey work, so the stage we've got to now is I've dug out the paths, I put piles of sets along the edge, and Dave, who does all the clever things in the garden, is actually laying the sets for me, and I'm hoping he's going to finish one of the paths today. Come and see how I set it out. So Unity worked out the actual radius that we need for the serpentine on the plan, and basically the internal radius is 5,000, and the internal radius is basically 5,575 millimeters, so just over 5.5 meters. So what you do is you get a string line and you put it that internal radius from the edge. So you get your string line and you mark it out to that, measuring it carefully with a tape measure, and then with a pencil at the other end of the string line, you literally just draw it. So that's how you do it. So with a pencil, you'll hold it really tight and you'll draw it round to transcribe that curve. And then the second radius is going to be 320 millimeters from the first radius. So it's actually 5.875 meters, this second radius. And that's because I've got 3 100 sets with a 10 millimeter joint between them, which adds up to 320. So then, having done that and got the pieces at the end exactly the right angle, where the two curves on the serpentine meet, as you can see they're angled, then it's cut out, and there I've got my template for the serpentine. So the next stage is the fun stage, and just put that in my back pocket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the template, I'm going to lie it on the path, and then I'm going to spray marker it with the spray marker. I'll just put the drawings underneath the leg. So there's the spray marker, here's the template, and you see we had to join 2 bits of ply. You can buy offcuts of ply, which is quite useful because it's quite cheap. This is just a very thin, cheap ply. Now here, you can see I started a lot of this, and I've just left a bit to show you. So what I've done here to dig out is I've started, I put the template down. Now when you put out your string line, so I've got 2 string lines, which are the difference between the outside of one curve and the inside of the other curve, and that for my dimensions is 700 millimeters. So I put those 700 millimeters apart. I've done the same at the other end, so I've got 2 parallel string lines. Now, having put this on the ground, the next stage is just to spray it out. Now, I did do this more accurately than I'm doing it now, but you can see, and you just get the spray marker paint, or you can use emulsion paint and a bit of brush, or whatever you like, and then you just spray it like that. Now, I've actually done it slightly differently, and then when I've done the whole thing, I remove this, and then I've just dug it out to that width, which you can see there. And I'm just digging it to a depth of around it's digging it to a depth of just the sets and about 60 mil of mortar. So it's about 100 mil deep, something like that. And because I've glyphosated off the grass, it's quite easy. Now, it's a curve, and so I just go down the edges and then I just pull it out. And I did this path just before we had really heavy rains, which is why it looks a little bit ad hoc. But Dave will just use the template to check as he goes along. And I've dug it out, and then I put the turf, the soil on the side, and then I'll level it all out before I plant. Now, because I've killed off the grass here, it will be actually quite nice to plant. It'll be quite nice and easy to plant in. I won't have any perennial grass weeds coming through, hopefully. So the planting should be easy to maintain. Now come and look at what we've done on this side, and you can just see the start of it. So here you can see, because I've taken the arches away from the hornbeam, we've got more light to this space than we had before, which is great. So before I just had very simple paving, it didn't have much attention. I just had this variegated euonymus, hellebores, sarcococca, things like that. But now, because I'll have a bit more light, I'll have more scope. But we're going to talk about the planting in this very dry, shady position in the next video. Plants to choose, how you set them out, what style of planting. But here you can see what Dave's done. So he's done the 3 bands of sets, and you can see they're picking up the wiggles of the curve, and it's a very regular serpentine. You can see I placed the sets along there for him, so as he works from right to left. He's got them there. And then when he's finished, so these are Indian Stone sets, they're Raj green, they're 100 by 100, let me show you one, and they're not sawn. So when you buy a set, you can get them made of all different materials, Now these are Raj green Indian stone, and retail they're about £45 for 100. That's a square metre. And you see there are various different thicknesses, and they come in slightly different colours. It's a variation which I like. So they are slightly different depths. But what happens is, Dave will put the mixture of sand and cement here. It's a sharp sand. He'll lay a bed to a depth of about 50-60 mil, and he'll push them in, and he'll choose the ones of a similar depth as he goes. So he'll have an area all quite thin ones and then all quite fat ones, and we've got quite a tight 10 mil joint. Because they're tumbled, you don't get a clean edge, so you will have a wider joint than if you had a sawn set, which has a very sharp edge, and then you might just butt them together and brush some sand in. But when he's finished, we will brush in a jointing material, and we'll just brush it in and then maybe lightly wet it and it will go off. But I think this curve is looking really nice. It goes on up to the hedge house at the top, which you can see. So that's a trellis hedge house, which we built probably 20 years ago. And you can see it's got a mirror at the end, and it's just made of roofing battens. We knocked it together with roofing battens, but there's a hornbeam hedge in there now, which has got to the top. So it does actually form a little hedge house. I was thinking the trellis would have fallen to bits before now, and it would just be a hedge house. But actually it still looks pretty good, and I'm amazed. We might put something in the end, a little table or something like that. So here we are, we've got a sort of more informal path with a serpentine path, making these little areas just a bit more interesting. I've got a bigger space to plant, which I like. I won't have to mow this grass anymore, which I really like. And I think it's going to be quite exciting to choose really good plants for dry shade that look wonderful for most of the year. One plant I know I'm going to use is sarcococca. And it's just a dwarf sarcococca hedge, which will follow the path either side and really big it up. Now sarcococca's evergreen, got beautiful fragrant white flowers that sort of finish end of February, beginning of March. But I think that will help emphasize the shape, and then we'll have more naturalistic planting either side. I'll show you all that in the next video.